All right, today is the 19th of November. It is 11:02 and we'll get started. Just want to introduce myself. My name is John Zeman with TPM Safety Specialist. I've met most of you and some of you haven't. I look forward to that opportunity. So once again, we'll get started. Today we're going to cover winter safety. With the cold weather coming upon us, there's a few issues that we need to address to keep our people safe, and we'll go over those today. Some of the hazards we'll talk about today are cold, hypothermia, frostbite, ice, slips and falls, snow shoveling, holiday vacations, dealing with non-routine tasks that some people may be given to cover for people on vacation. One of the issues we'll talk about, I guess, right now on that one is, that's one thing a lot of us don't think of sometimes is, when someone takes a vacation or time off around the holidays, well, what do we do to fill their spot? If we keep running through those holidays, what do we do? And one of the things we always have to think about is what's going to change. Might put a new person to that job in place of an older person that's been there for a while. And what are some of the hazards that can come with that? Is that new person to that job, are they familiar with it? Do they know the hazards involved? Do they know the controls to that job? So that's what we kind of have to look at, not just send somebody in to do somebody else's job because they're gone on vacation, but make sure they're trained for that job. So those are some of the things we have to think about with, especially this time of year, with filling in different people. Also, we'll talk about driving conditions. When the roads get icy and snowy, what do we got to do to prepare for those? And then what changes do we have to do with our equipment on the maintenance and operation of our different equipment that we have at our sites? Now, these are some of the factors that really increase the risk of cold injuries. So if you had a previous cold injury, a lot of times if you froze your ears off before, they'll get cold a lot easier the second time around. Some of us maybe got exposed or a car broke down and we had to walk a long distance. We didn't have our hat. Well, later on, our ears are a lot more susceptible to another injury from having cold or frostbite or different things like that. Predisposed health conditions, if you have heart trouble or different things like that, well, when the air is cold, it puts more stress on your body, which can exacerbate these other health conditions that you have. We also want to look at, fatigue, poor physical condition. Our body labors harder in the cold than it does without. Poor nutrition, what we eat, what we take in, how we fuel our bodies has a big impact on how our bodies can deal with the cold weather. We also want to look at dehydration. When it's cold, a lot of times we don't think about it, but our body still processes fluid just as readily as when it's hot. So we might not sweat as much, it might not be so noticeable, but we go through a lot of water, especially when we're working. So we have to make sure we're staying hydrated with cold weather work. Any medications that we may be on, any changes that might affect us, our circulation, stuff like that. Alcohol, that always can impact our bodies. Caffeine, nicotine, our age, improper clothing and equipment. One thing we got to look at too is, last winter we didn't have a problem. Well, maybe this summer we had a problem. Well, how is winter and cold weather going to affect us now that, we're getting a little older every year? How does that affect us? We have to kind of look at some of those changes. I know some of the basics of safety can be applied to this. We look at management of change, input, output. What has changed in the last year and how can that affect us? Improper clothing, underactivity, overactivity, cold conditions, and then the length of exposure, planning work. If you send people out to do a job outside, are they ready? Especially if you're in the management side of things, looking at, are our people, do they got caps? Do they got gloves? Just kind of looking at people, to make sure people are prepared. So some of the things we can do to prevent cold-related injuries and illnesses is wear appropriate clothing. Caps, gloves, face masks. If it's windy out and you want some kind of wind-breaking material that can stop the wind from penetrating, so, like sweaters and stuff like that usually don't work as well in the wind compared to, say, like a Carhartt with the duck cloth, say, the 1,000 denier type um, clothing and protective layers. Avoid wetness and excessive sweating. You sweat because you're hot, your body wants to cool off, and then you get wet, and then the wet leads to your body doing what it's supposed to, is cooling itself, but then it cools at a higher rate than normal because it's wet, and then it's cold and wet, and then you can get freezing and all that and cause more damage. Staying dry is a big part of all this. Changing to dry clothes and shoes if they become wet. If the guys are working outside or girls working outside, kind of look at that. I mean, maybe people should bring an extra pair of socks, stuff like that. Make sure the boots, if you have people out doing, in wet conditions for their feet, we wouldn't want them to get trench foot or any of that stuff because things are cold and wet. It can add up over days and long periods of time working in snow and wet, cold weather. So avoid sitting and standing still for prolonged periods. You need to keep the blood flowing and the circulation going to keep your extremities from, becoming injured. Take frequent breaks in warm, shielded areas. I mean, if some of our mills are wide open, maybe we need to put up some windbreak, to stop the wind at least. Work in pairs, use the buddy system, especially with the cold weather, because of this extra stress in our bodies. If you send somebody out to do something, make sure everybody knows where they're going, when to expect them back. So if they don't return, we can go look for them. Radios are always a good key to this. Just lots of good communication. You want people to drink plenty of warm, non-caffeinated, non-alcoholic liquids, and smoking. Smoking, is smoking. We all know about that. Okay, dressing for winter work. This is usually how I come to work every day. I dress up like this. I don't like getting cold, especially being from South Dakota. Those of you who don't know, I grew up in the great state of South Dakota. It's probably one of the colder states. Not quite as cold as North Dakota, where Chris, the other safety guy, is from, but pretty close though. My senior year of high school, we missed about 2 months of school. We missed all of December because of snow, and we missed all of January because of cold. We had a week period in January in my senior high school where it was 60 below, with the wind chills and stuff like that. So the buses and people, they didn't want anybody out. So we experienced, quite a long period of, dealing with cold weather. And so this is usually how I come dressed, because I'm always prepared, right? All right, dressing for winter. During cold weather, it can have a very chilling effect, and it can affect your different senses. It's usually difficult to be productive when you are cold. Therefore, it's important to stay warm. I mean, so we can get the job done. We always want to dress in layers, especially since my familiarity with this part of the country, it seems like it warms up. It starts out cold in the morning, afternoon, the sun comes out, and it can get warm out. So it's best to dress in layers, so you can remove the clothing so you don't get all sweaty and cause more problems. So you don't want to over bundle. You want to be able to do the layer thing. And then if we're working toward the later hours of the day, we want to be able to put those layers back on as the temperature drops again after the afternoon. So we want to minimize sweat, because it really helps. It can really lead to major problems with us reducing heat or losing heat through evaporative cooling. So looking for what we want to do is we kind of want to look at dressing for winter work, like our PPE. We talk about hard hats, we talk about gloves and safety glasses and all that. Well, your coat can be just as important as all the other PPE. Wearing head protection will increase your overall warmth, and half the body's stress from heat loss usually comes from your head. A lot of blood flows through your head, so it can lose a lot of heat. So that wearing a cap is so important to minimize the heat loss. Another thing is feet. We talked about, keeping them dry, but there's a lot of things out there that, there's some new things. I wear acrylic wool socks every day, even in the summer. I like how the wicking, keeps my feet dry and it's comfortable to me. But so I mean, having wool socks or the new acrylic is where it's at. Really nowadays, it's even better than the wool. Um, so you can kind of look at that. I mean, overshoes, a lot of us say if wear boots, you can get like the rubber pull-on overshoes to keep your boots dry and warm. Your toes won't freeze that way. So you kind of got to look at that. And then one of the newer inventions, I guess, has been out for the last few years is yak tracks. I can't speak highly enough about yak tracks. From my experiences in the past, say working with South Dakota DOT and all the snow plowing activities, I made sure all the guys and gals out there plowing snow had yak tracks so they could slip them on when they're out doing roadside assistance, working around the yard. Yak tracks allow you to run on solid ice. They are amazing. They're, if you go online, you can look around, you can find them for maybe $6 or $7, name brand ones too. So I mean, they're just coiled wire around rubber. I'll get to a picture of them. You can kind of see exactly what they are if you haven't seen them before. But there's other brands. When yak tracks are awesome because they don't tear the pockets of your coat. A lot of the other ones are spikes, and if you put them in your coat pocket, they'll tear your coat up. So the yak tracks are very effective for the slip and fall aspect, but they're also very protective of like your coat when you put them in your pocket, say if you come inside. Gloves. Gloves are very, very important. One of the biggest things I usually talk about gloves for is layers. Like I had a pretty strong background saying snow plowing and all that kind of area with the DOT, and all the guys have been working on the roads, gals out there working with 20, 30 years out in that cold weather, and they always wore 2 pairs of gloves. They had a thin pair of gloves for just like fine work, and they had a thick pair of gloves to kind of go over, even mittens to go over the thin pair, so you could take them off and on, because a lot of times you can't do something. What do? You tear your gloves off. Well, if you're only wearing 1 pair of gloves, you tear that glove off to get better control over, say, if you're working with tools and stuff, you'll take off the glove and then your hand will be totally exposed. So that's why they wore 2 pair. They wore a real thin pair that protected you from the wind, but yet you still have the dexterity to do the job that you're working on. So that's, when you're out working with the fine tools, it's good to have the 2 pair. So kind of look into that, say, for the maintenance aspect of things. And the worst thing you do is overdress. You get all sweaty and then you end up taking your clothes off and you're all wet, and your body just loses so much heat once you get wet. So that layering effect, I know, like with the South Dakota DOT plow drivers, I got them all the high vis coats, and they were all layered. There's an outer shell, an inner shell, so you could remove the outer shell or wear either one or both, depending on the temperature. They even had removable sleeves. So I was really big into the layering. So, maybe you just need to keep your core warm. So you can take the sleeves off. You zip the sleeves off. You got a vest. Zip them back on. You got arms covered, just depending on the layering. Because when you're working, the worst thing you can do is get all sweaty, and you get super cold once you quit working so hard, and then you're all wet. So the layering effect is so important. So next topic we'll talk about is shoveling. We all enjoy shoveling. When I was a kid in South Dakota, I made a lot of money shoveling. I went all my neighbors and shovel. I did a lot of shoveling in my lifetime. These are some of the key safety facts that they talk about, and that's keeping up with the storm. Wait till you got 3 feet to shovel. Do a foot at a time. Kind of look at the weather. Think you're going to get 2 feet of snow. Well, shovel a foot. Go out later, shovel another foot. Try not to do it all at once, because that's when you can get in trouble. Push. If you can push it off, a lot of times that's a lot easier. So if you kind of do a few rounds or you keep ahead of it, you can just use your push type shovels where you don't have to strain yourself lifting. So you just push all the snow off your sidewalk. You're good to go. One of the things we talk about in safety a lot of times is engineering controls. What's an engineering control for shoveling? Just not do it, right? Use a snowblower, use a bobcat, use a skid loader, use a loader. Do whatever you can not to shovel. Don't shovel at all if you can help it. Up in British Columbia, I know not British Columbia, I think it's Alberta, one of the Canadian provinces up there, I think it's that Winnipeg is in. I was told by a safety guy one time that the city of Winnipeg shovels everybody's sidewalks because the way the healthcare system is up there, if you're out shoveling, you only shovel once in a while and you have yourself a heart attack, it costs $1 million to fix you. Well, because the way it's all set up, the city comes and shovels people's sidewalks all the way to their door because that's what they're designed to do. They have all the equipment, they have highly trained people to do all the shoveling. So, I mean, they don't even allow the residents of Winnipeg to shovel their own sidewalks, the way I understand it. But anyways, so how do you avoid shoveling? Not, snow blower, stuff like that, especially in industrial setting. Want to minimize the shoveling to begin with. But if you do have to do some shoveling, which we all have probably do, especially if you get dumped on to open up doorways, stuff like that, to even get to the snow blower, be doing a lot of shoveling. So do the layer thing because you'll get heated up after a few feet of shoveling. Wear good boots, stay very hydrated. That's where you can really lose the water is the shoveling. So some techniques to kind of look forward to, we say don't use your back, use your legs. This is very, very evident situation of that situation. You want to look at, keeping your feet wide apart, put the weight on the front foot close to the shovel, and use the leg to push the shovel straight ahead, and then shift the weight to the rear foot, keep the shovel loaded close to the body, lift with arms and legs, not the back. And be careful. This one got me one time. Probably should have got stitches for this one, but the snow was wet, fell off the shovel, and the shovel came flying back and caught me between the eyes, and it happens. So be very mindful of that. Keep your shovel square so it doesn't tip and you lose the snow and the shovel will come back and get you. So I got a scar to prove it if you look closely. But anyways, lift with your legs, not your back. So, and then turn in the direction of the throw and pivot the entire body, not twisting. We go through the ergonomics. There's ergonomics training here, 101, right? You do not want to twist. You want to use your feet. Turn with your feet, throw the snow. Do not turn with your waist because your back is weak in that department, and after shoveling a while, you will injure it. So use your legs to turn with, not your waist. So there, you guys got some ergonomics training. All right, using powered equipments like snow blowers. That's the next thing. We want to use the engineering control, use snow blowers, not shoveling if we can help it. Well, what happens to snow blowers? I keep going back to my South Dakota DOT days, but I got a lot of fun with snow and those, working when I used to work there. So we had a gentleman, one of our maintenance supervisors, he reached into a snow blower because it was plugged up on a stick, and he lost, I think, half his thumb and a couple other fingers. Yeah, it was pretty horrible. And then you can imagine what happened when he did this at home, though, of course. But when he came to work, and he could never live that one down because he lost the fingers from reaching in the snowblower. But that's one thing to be very mindful of. The snowblowers, you need to just do the lockout tag out, basically, to shut it down. Just lodge the stick, or if you run into something that plugs it up, make sure you shut it down. Do not reach into a live snowblower. The other thing is make sure it's turned off, best way to do is add all the fuel before you start it up so it's all full before you turn it on, so then you reduce any kind of fire issue because you got a cold machine instead of a hot machine. And what is a hot machine? It's an ignition source, right? So that's one thing to look at with snowblowers. This back at the Slip and Falls, it got its own very special slide in our presentation today. How can we avoid falling? Well, there's a few things. You can walk like a penguin. If any of you ever seen a penguin walk, they don't fall down, and all they do is live on ice. Well, what they do is they don't make any sudden movements. They kind of shuffle their feet. They keep their feet shoulder width apart, so they kind of have a nice wide base, and bend their knees a little bit, and they take short, choppy steps. That's how you operate. If any of you all have been ice fishing before, I went ice fishing probably every winter in my life growing up, and out on that big old Missouri River, that's where I used to do ice fishing on, and it was solid, nice glass ice out there, and I learned how to do short, choppy steps. So, but the new inventions came along, the yak tracks. There's some pictures of the yak tracks. They're just rubber with coiled wire around them. You strap them over your boots or your shoes, And just like that bottom picture there, you can run on solid ice with those things because they dig in, they create a nice coefficient of friction between your feet and the ice, and you can keep on working. You don't have to worry about falling down. They're pretty amazing. I didn't have these growing up when all the ice fishing I did. I wish I had. Probably could have had some fun with the family out there running around. But anyways, they're pretty good. They're pretty cheap, inexpensive. You can find them online with $6 to $10. You know, especially if you buy a quantity of them. They have just the basic ones that just strap over, and then the bottom picture shows the more kind of industrial ones. They have a strap that goes over the toes of your shoe, and then that kind of holds them on. But from my experience, like the maintenance workers at DOT and stuff, they never used the strap. It was just kind of extra. They didn't really see a need for that. So those are the more expensive ones. So I would just get the ones that come over. They stay on pretty good unless you're going to be running a long ways in them. I wouldn't probably figure we'd be doing that. So one thing I just kind of wanted to show you real quick with this presentation here. Slip and falls, right? Whoa. Ooh, that one looked like it hurt. Well, anyways, that's some obvious evidence of the slip and falls we have. What do most people do when they fall? They usually get up and look around and see if anybody saw them fall, right? So that's kind of one of the things we got to look at with slip and falls. That's why the yak tracks. I mean, I love them. I mean, they're so awesome. Anybody's going to be working outside, especially when it starts getting icy and you got snow and you know, melt and freeze, and you got ice all over. Yak tracks is where it's at. And then when you take them off, you can see how that coiled wire is. You don't tear up your coats. I mean, we furnished coats for our people, so we didn't want to get them tore up, right? So we found out that these things, you know, they don't have the little points that can catch your coat and tear your coat up. So these make it, you know, they make your coat last. So, but anyways, yak tracks, pretty awesome. Okay, some of the other hazards we're going to look at is, you know, temperature and wind, snow and ice, mounting and dismounting vehicles. A lot of experienced people falling off snow plows, skid loaders, stuff like that, because everything's wet and everything's slippery. And you know, with us and the tarping stuff, we talk about the tarping stations and all that. Most of the fatalities with tarping loads are usually in the wintertime. You got snow and ice and wet conditions. People are climbing around in their trucks and they fall and, you know, get hurt. Visibility, fatigue, that's another big thing, and different driving stuff. So, you know, when winter sets in, weather controls our lives. We need to kind of look at, well, what do? We got to allow more time. When do most accidents happen? When people are in a hurry. You know, real quick, I'll go do that. Well, you run into some snow and ice or something that slows you down, and then you go even quicker to try to make up for that lost time. Well, what does that lead to? It leads to an accident or an injury. So we always have to plan ahead. We know the roads are going to be slippery, or we know that a job's out in the cold. We need to plan accordingly. It's not summer anymore. So this is number one hazard a lot of people talk about with cold weather, and that's frostbite. You want to limit the exposure and time, wear proper clothing, natural fabrics, the acrylics, the different synthetics, and keep your face and hands and ears covered. Stop that wind from hitting your skin. Depending how cold it is, limit that time. Now, hypothermia, we talk about that. It's just the change in the body core temperature. Kind of the rule we look at is the 98.6 degrees is our body tries to maintain somewhere around there. And if the body feels that it cannot keep up with that, it starts shutting down. It starts shutting down your extremities so it can keep you alive. Basically, it goes into kind of the old fight or flight type of mechanism, and your hands and feet and stuff can really suffer because our body's shutting those systems down to preserve your brain and your main core temperature. So preventing, we talked about dressing in layers, staying dry. Tobacco, basically it's a vasoconstrictor. It reduces the effective blood flow. So just a little bit on that. I mean, I'm not one to really harp on the whole smoking thing, but one of the things a person to think about is the science behind it. The nicotine in a cigarette or chew and stuff like that, what it does is it causes the veins of your body to constrict and expand. And then what happens is after the nicotine goes through the body, it actually makes your blood vessels a little bit smaller. So then it restricts the blood flow. So that's one of the things we got to be very aware of. And that's why smoking and heart disease and all that is because your veins get a little smaller and the smaller they are, the easier things can plug. And that's kind of the effect of the nicotine. So anyways, the no alcohol central nervous system suppressant. The alcohol can affect how your body retains heat. I mean, I've been ice fishing before. I mean, I'm not going to go into peppermint schnapps and any of that stuff, but they say it's bad as far as keeping you warm. So I would agree with that. So other weather issues you got to look at the depth and consistency of snow. Resistance while trekking. A normal walk in the summer is different than a normal walk in the winter because of the depth of the snow, the more ice, the slip and fall hazard. If we're walking like a penguin, it takes a lot more energy. So that's where you have cardiovascular issues. If you have and maybe you had a slight heart attack, something like that. But when you go for a walk like you normally do, well, when it's snowing, it's going to tax your body more. It's going to stress you out more, and it can lead to other things. So you got to be very mindful of how that will impact any walking in snow. Looking for hidden objects. I know, like in the yard, you got to do cleanup, stuff like that. Cleanup of snow. Do a survey before the snow gets there. If you got a yard person or a facility manager, different things like that, send them out. Have them survey the area. Where are the gas tanks at? Where are the different things that they could run into with a loader or a skid loader when they're cleaning the yard. Have them mark things out. Have them put some pogo sticks up, or they have those different colored markers you can put in the ground, different things like that to mark different areas that if you got a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet of snow, you could hit and you could tear up, you could ruin your equipment, or you could cause damage to the building or different things like that. So have your people survey the area before you get the snow, because once the snow's there, it's hard finding hidden objects, right? So frozen slush gets real slippery, and then ruts, traveling across ruts, different things like that, damage your equipment. All right, mounting, dismounting equipment. Big thing here is this whole 3 points of contact. We always need to maintain 3 points of contact when entering or leaving a vehicle. And this is so important, especially when we're dealing with winter weather. Everything's wet, everything's slippery, everything's cold. Our boots are harder. The rubber on our boots is harder in the winter. That means the coefficient of friction goes down. Your boots are slipperier. Plus to the water and the ice and the snow and the mud and all that kind of stuff. So that 3 points of contact is so important. That means you either keep 2 hands and 1 foot or 2 feet and 1 hand touching the vehicle or grabbing hold at all times. So these are a couple pictures. You got on the left, you got the 2 hands and 1 foot. Gentleman climbing in the forklift. You just got to be so careful when things are slippery, getting in and out of equipment. So basically, you just keep square, pull up, keep things balanced. So if your foot slides out from underneath you, you got 2 hands holding on so you don't fall. And you make sure you have grab points, and don't use the steering wheel because that moves. It doesn't, you'll fall into the equipment and that hurts too. So another thing, equipment in the winter changes. Oil gets thicker, especially if you have anything with hydraulics. Things slow down. A loader bucket's going to lift a lot slower, or a forklift is going to lift a lot slower in the cold weather. So you got to be mindful of that. If you're used to spinning around in a forklift and you're carrying something somewhere, well, it's going to change it up because you're not going to be able to lift as fast, and different things will be affected by the cold weather. And that means you should always, I'm sure everybody does their pre-use inspections on other equipment. So, this is probably not a big issue, but be mindful, to do these more diligently in the wintertime. Things break, things crack, plastic gets harder, things break because of that. So you need to, really hit on your inspections in the wintertime. With the fluids, the glass, the lights, mirrors, mounting points, tires, your different mounts, all the different functions of your different equipment that you might use. Things do change and you need to be on top of them so you can stop something before it turns into a big problem. Nutrition. We've talked about this a few times, but one of the big parts of it is staying, aware. We're working, we're doing things, we want our mind to be sharp, and usually for that to happen, our body needs to be well fueled. Now we want to look at what's good, a donut, or look at that sandwich. It's got it right before dinner. I don't want to see that. I think that's what I think I'm going to have for lunch today, right? Look at that healthy sandwich. But anyways, that's kind of things we want. We want some veggies, we want some carbohydrates, but we want more complex carbohydrates. Soup, chili, ooh, chili, that's always really good. Your different lean meat, your bread, the bagels, cereals, peanut butter. Oh, peanut butter is really good. Energy bars, trail mix, bananas, and plenty of water. Plenty of water. Anything that's just kind of made with white flour usually isn't too good for you. So pastries, candy bars, sugary sodas, etc. It's just not good fuel. So we can keep our bodies in shape and keep our minds sharp. Fatigue. Well, we've all experienced fatigue. We've all worked long hours. We've put time in different places. But it's very critical that we know the demands of our job and we adjust to accommodate all this. One of the biggest things I've harped on before, and I always do it, is to get the TV out of the bedroom. Bedroom should not be used to watch TV. It's used for sleeping. So do not have a TV in your bedroom. Get it out of there. Because the TV robs us of so much sleep every day that it's just, we should get away from that. Anyways, if we're going to be up at 5, we need to adjust so we can get our 7 hours of sleep. So it just kind of depends. Look at your schedule and adjust your sleep accordingly. You have to do a trip or you have to do something that requires you to get up early, adjust accordingly, and then adjust for the winter. You got to think about it. Driving in snow and ice is way more taxing mentally and will tire you out than a normal drive and a normal work. So you got to think about that. Working in cold weather taxes your body more. So we kind of want to look at, how does this, how does our personal choices affect our job performance and how tired will this make us? So we got to kind of take all that into account when we're adjusting our sleep and trying to fight fatigue. We don't want to be like the guy here in the picture with the toothpicks in the eyelids, because usually that doesn't help. Then we got to be very aware of other drivers. You guys are sitting through this training. You're going to be well aware of your responsibilities and your winter driving techniques, stuff like that. But what about other drivers? This is one thing I learned from an old safety guy that I used to work around. He said, very simple. Uh, a driver will do something to you before they'll do something for you. He always said that. I'm like, what does that mean? Well, drive defensively, basically. Some people, like, for example, this morning, there's no power here in Spokane, and basically when the street lights are not blinking, it's supposed to be a four-way stop. Well, I was about ready to go because it was my turn, and another car just hammered it right through the intersection, didn't even stop. So, I mean, you just got to be very cautious, very defensive, especially in the wintertime, because the stopping distances are a lot different. Read the road ahead, identify different problem drivers, know your vehicle's limitations as well as its capabilities. I know sometimes we rent cars, and some of the cars we rent, I don't know if they're like a 2-cylinder or whatnot, but they're, so you got to be very mindful of what can your vehicle do. Can it get you out of a dangerous situation if you have to? In the snow and the ice, once you start hitting the brake, usually you're done. You lose control. So being able to control the speed of your vehicle is very important, so you can control your vehicle, because once you hit the brakes, you can't steer usually. So be very mindful of that. Speed, I mean, faster you go, the longer it takes you to stop. So you're looking at the vehicle's condition, the driver condition, the road conditions, the weather, the time of day, always looking for deer, stuff like that. And that affects us in the yard too. I mean, forklifts, those hard tires, the coefficient of friction isn't as good when there's snow and ice laying around, everything's wet. So, everybody needs to be mindful and slow down when winter sets in. So these are a couple of things. There's a formula just kind of put this into perspective for speed and stopping. So you got reaction response time plus braking distance plus road surface conditions equals the stopping distance. So you add all them factors up. In the wintertime, the RC, the road surface conditions, greatly increases because of the snow and ice. So that increases the stopping distance. So that means you got to brake sooner. Your reaction time needs to be sooner, or you got to think ahead a lot more. So lowering your speed will give you more time to react, especially with winter road conditions. So I mean, here's an example. I talk about at 55, you travel 88 feet per second. So following distance is very critical. It's 3 seconds. They would say, 3 seconds. Well, maybe when it's snow and ice, you should follow people 5 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds. Push yourself back further so you have more time to react, so you can adjust your speed accordingly. So, going 10 miles an hour faster usually will get you there, a minute sooner? I mean, just think about some of that travel stuff. And one of the major issues, when is it too cold? Who makes the call? When do we stop work? Input from workers. Talk to some of the people who have been working out in these conditions for a lot of years. When is it too cold? I mean, people are going to whine around about it being cold when it's cold, but how much? You got to kind of know when to draw the line, though, to make that call. Hey, it's too cold. We cannot work, especially if you have open mills or open areas where people are out working. Can put heat on them, but you got to look at that. We don't want to send people home with hypothermia or frostbite. So, plus, I mean, it's very taxing. Maybe you just need to add more breaks. If it gets cold, and add in more breaks. Have them take a 10-minute every hour instead of a 15 every 2. Something like that. But then you can keep working, but also you're going to protect your workers from that cold weather injury. Now we're going to get into the fun part of our discussion, and that's holiday safety. It's one of the things. We got Thanksgiving coming up, and we got Christmas coming up. So these are some things I felt, they're kind of on borderline. Well, is it work related? Well, yeah. If you get sick at home, you ain't gonna be able to come to work. It means your company's not going to get production out of you. So I mean, yeah, some of these things are very relevant to the workplace, even though some of this will be for home stuff too. So looking at 8,000 people from injuries around the holidays. That's usually, I think this is Christmas here. Falls, shocks, fires, about 30 deaths a year, 17 million in property loss and damage. I mean, that's just Christmas, these numbers here are Christmas related, around the 25th of December. So because injuries at the home can, lead to this, it's very important to know safety in your home as well as the workplace, because some of us decorate our workplace too. So we got to be mindful. We'll run through some of these. So we're going to do a holiday quiz. All right. First question, how can you avoid fire hazards concerning Christmas trees? Well, number one, check your batteries and your smoke detectors. If you haven't done it now's a good time. Make sure your smoke detectors are charged up, ready to go. If you have an artificial tree, look for the label fire resistant before you buy one. Doesn't mean the tree won't catch fire, it just means it's still safer than one that isn't. So, that might be a good thing when you buy a fake tree, to look at if it's resistant. Now, I'm more of the person that loves live trees. I'm not really into the fake trees, so but live trees they're awesome. I love the smell of them. I love how they look. The way to go. So check for freshness. You look some of these places, they already got trees out now. So that's what, a month and a half almost before Christmas. And we all know lumber, right? And we know timber, it's going to dry out as the time progresses. With the heat on in the house, you ain't spraying it down with water, are we? No, it's going to get dry. So we want to make sure the trees are nice and fresh. Needles are hard to pull from branches. Needles do not break when bent. That's one way to test them when you're picking trees. The trunk or butt of the tree is sticky with resin. That'll help seal in some of that moisture. Trees should not lose lots of needles. Like you pound it on the ground, it shouldn't just half the needles fall off. Then it's too dry. Dry tree is not safe. We talk about that with combustible dust. Things under 25% moisture can lead to real dry dust, stuff like that. Question number 2, what safety precautions should you take when decorating with lights? Well, use your lights that have been tested for safety by a recognized testing laboratory. Basically, everything we buy in our country usually has UL on it, and it's been tested, so that's not so relevant. But we want to check our lights. Make sure we don't have broken ones. Check the cords. Did the cat chew on the cord last year? Make sure we don't have exposed wires. Just like any other safety inspection, right? We want to make sure we don't have exposed wires. They can lead to fires and shocks and stuff like that. Check each set of lights, especially the old ones. I know, we try to bundle them up the best we can, but most of the time the elves get into our Christmas lights and they tangle them all up for us. So we need to make sure as we're untangling them that the wires are in good shape, the bulbs aren't broken, there's no exposed wires, any cracked sockets, loose connections, and throw out damaged sets. I know lately there's been this big push to the LEDs, but they get tangled up just as bad as the other ones do. But so they're a lot more expensive nowadays, so you hate to throw them out. But just be mindful of that. It's not worth burning your house down to save $10 on a string of lights. So just be mindful. Use no more than 3 standard sets of lights per single extension cord. So just remember, we got the extension cord exception going on here with the Christmas lights, so be very mindful. You get any more than 3 sets of lights strung together, go off another outlet so you don't, overload things and it starts getting hot and can lead to fire. Continuation on that one. Look at this fancy setup here. We got outlets going all over the place, and we got things plugged into it. Maybe a little overloaded there. Just be very, very mindful of how many things we plug into an outlet and plug into our circuits in our house. Make sure that, the surge protectors can get overloaded. So we need to be, or not surge protectors, but power strips. So lights can short out, start fires, plug outdoor electric lights and decorations to circuits protected by ground fault circuit interrupts. GFCI is the way to go. Depending on how new your house is, they have GFCI outlets are always really good to use. So they'll shut off if there's a loss of power going somewhere, like a short or grounding out somewhere else other than through the system. Portable outdoor GFCIs can be purchased. So you can get these little pigtails that you can put in line on your lights that give it GFCI protection. It's always good if you got cats or dogs. Cats and dogs, for some reason, love the way that green plastic tastes. So GFCI is a way to protect them from, anyways, getting shocked probably. But GFCIs can be installed permanently to household circuits by a qualified electrician, or some of us have skills, or in the breaker. You can put a GFCI in the breaker actually too. So you can put it in the outlets, in line or every one, or you can put it in the breaker, a GFCI right in there. So those will pop if there's any loss of current. That'll help protect your puppies and kitties. Some of us remember this, right? Home Alone, one of my favorite holiday movies. You got to look at the ornaments, stuff like that, cuts and stuff like that. So that leads us to question 3. What are some safety precautions you can take when choosing and using decorations? Choose tinsel and artificial icicles and plastic with non-leaded metals. I know most of the stuff, this is getting kind of filtered out. We don't get a lot of lead anymore in our country. Never use leaded candles or tree near evergreens. The lighted candles. I know when I was a kid, we used to have the actual candles on the tree. Some of you guys, people might remember that. But we've kind of done away with that with the lights. And the LED lights nowadays are super safe. So those are awesome to switch to if you haven't yet. So the candles thing is kind of on its way out. So if you still use those, they look cool, but they're very dangerous. And then avoid decorations that are sharp or breakable. I don't like the plastic balls are sometimes better than the glass balls, and you don't get broken stuff, especially if you got dogs and cats. They love to knock stuff off the trees, and you get glass broken all over the place, and you get kids into all that, and it's just sometimes better to use what would be engineering controls and just not use the glass balls if you can avoid it. Avoid trimmings that resemble candy or food, so little kids maybe will try eating them. Plastic's not real good for kids to digest. Wear gloves to avoid any irritant. I don't know if we used to always, when we put up our Christmas, what do you call it, creche with baby Jesus, all that, we always put down this angel hair, kind of look like snow. It's basically fiberglass, spun glass. I remember all the time I'd get all itchy because I always got to set it up. And that's why. And now, from putting this together, I kind of learned, oh, that's fiberglass. It's really itchy. So recommends to use gloves when you're playing with that angel hair, that fiberglass, if you use any of that stuff, or just don't even use it. Use engineering control, get rid of it, right? But it looks cool, so some of us still use it. Following container directions, avoiding lugging irritation, decorating with artificial snow spray. Some of us spray our windows, stuff like that, make it look frosty. Just be careful, chemicals, what we're exposing ourselves to. And beware of mistletoe and holly. Believe it or not, that stuff can be poisonous, especially to our pets, but also to us. So just be careful if you're kissing the missus under the mistletoe that it doesn't fall in your mouth when you're doing it. So anyways, But question 4, how can I make my holiday festivities safer? Well, we got a lot of family around, people bringing kids in, especially if we're not used to little kids in the house. Be very mindful of them. Turn the handles of pots and pans, inward so the little kids can't reach and grab them. It seems like growing up, we always had people getting burned with holiday cooking. Somehow somebody would get in the kitchen that shouldn't be in there. But anyways, be mindful of the other little people. Keep knives, other sharp utensils away, put away from the kids. Keep hot foods and drinks away from table and counter edges. Avoid spills and breakages of glass. Never hold a child when you're carrying hot foods or drinks while you're cooking. Slip and fall into a stove, that's never fun. So offer plenty of non-alcoholic drinks as alternatives. Keep all drinks away from kids, of course. They don't know how to handle themselves a lot of times. They get a little eggnog or some of that. But anyways, do not place candy, chocolates, or other treats within the children's reach. We're talking little kids because we won't want them to have too much sugar. Well, maybe, but anyways, clean up right after a meal. It's not good to leave food setting out. We'll get into that a little bit later here. And do not keep any of your guests, don't let any of your guests drive home if they've been drinking. Be mindful of that. Give them the couch if they have had a little too much to drink, right? So food safety, it's kind of a 4-part rule: clean, separate, cook, and chill. Basically, clean. Remember to wash your hands with soap, warm water for 20 seconds. hand washing, make sure your utensils, your counters, everything's clean before you start working on your meals. You know, the turkey day coming up next week. So separate, try to use one cutting board for raw meat, poultry, seafood, and separate one for fresh produce. You know, you want to, you know, kind of keep the raw food from anything you eat without cooking. One of the biggest inventions that we have nowadays is these digital thermometers. I use a smokehouse quite a bit, so I'm cooking the meat a lot, and investing in one of these little digital thermometers is so awesome, so you don't overcook or undercook your food. Overcooking isn't probably gonna, you know, get you sick, but it will, you know, you won't be able to enjoy the food because it'll be overcooked and the flavor's gone. So one of these digital thermometers is so handy, especially for cooking turkey, cooking your lamb, cooking your hams. You know, if you use a smoker, all that kind of stuff. These little digital ones with the little cord with on the right, that picture there, those are really awesome, inexpensive way to get good tasting food without worrying about so much of the foodborne illnesses that can happen, say, if you don't cook your food enough. And then lastly, the chilling. You know, chill your food promptly. You know, get it out of that kill zone, that 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where bacteria loves to thrive. So, you know, get that food put away, get the leftovers put away. You know, after your big dinners you might be having over the holidays or anytime, you know, just be mindful of that stuff. Stuff has eggs in it, like your custards, your egg nogs, your deviled eggs, potato salads, all those different salads. If they get warm, bacteria loves to grow in them. So be very mindful of, you know, getting them in, getting them out of the fridge, you know, getting stuff cooled down as soon as possible. You know, some of us eat too much turkey and then we can't move, so we tend to hit the couch and watch football, stuff like that. But take a second, put those leftovers away so we can enjoy them again and again and not have a trip to the emergency room or something. So be mindful of keeping food safe. So in summary, looking at cold weather, yak tracks are just awesome. You know, looking at the yard, making sure things are planned out before the snow hits so you can identify things. You know, planning work, you know, planning everything. How does the snow and cold weather and snow affect things? You know, if you have a blizzard or if you have a lot of snow come down at once, well, what plans do we have? Do we have emergency action plan for cold weather, power outages, stuff like that? And we just lost power here in Spokane because the windstorm came through. Looking at ice storms, blizzards, stuff like that. You know, who do you contact? Make sure everybody's contact information is updated so you can get a hold of next of kin if, you know, some reason someone needs a ride or people don't show up, so you can kind of communicate in a blizzard or a snowy situation comes up so we can get people home safe. You know, make sure you have people's contact information updated. And then, you know, make sure your people are engaging the brain before putting the body in motion. Assume nothing and stay safe. So why do we care? Well, this is why we care. These are my two lovely children, Marshall and Bianca. Just be mindful to stay safe because these people need us. So that's their taekwondo. They just hit blue belt. So anyways, thought I'd share that with you. Thanks again. And these are recorded, so if you missed anything, you came on late, you can go to our website and hit up TPM's website for the recorded version of this and many other safety topics. And once again, I want you to know that Chris and I are here to help with your safety needs. Jeff is here for the employment law questions, and Letitia is here for the HR stuff, and our whole team is here for you. If you need any employee benefits questions, safety questions, legal questions, human resources, or any other services, we're here to help. And thank you so much for joining me today for today's webinar on winter safety. Appreciate it, and stay safe. Thank you.